Hey friends, welcome back. Now let's actually dive in a few visualizations as well as a few ways how we can simply get some insights in our dataset. For instance, some companies really love those waterfall charts. So we can select, for instance, our waterfall chart, and then we could say, let's actually display this by the countries we have. So if I use my customer country name, and by the way, if you do not know which is which, you can always simply make this a little bigger so you can see exactly customer country is referring to that. So I take this, and then I can see my customer countries, but of course I do not have any numerical data. That is why we can't see anything on the waterfall chart so far. But let's actually go with the total profit, for instance. I can take this, and then I would see this kind of visualization here. Now currently it's sorted by the profit itself, so we could simply go to the three dots here and maybe sort it by, let's say, by the customer country. I can take this, and then I see a different kind of ordering here, right? Now we start here with Venezuela, then United States, and so on. And the last one is then this zero entry. Of course, if you, just a second, go here and sort ascending, then of course you would simply start with the zero, okay? This is how you can adjust the sorting if you want to do that. However, we already spotted a little issue here, which is this zero. So obviously in our data set, there is some data missing, or in the country column itself is simply a zero inside. Well, this is of course not correct, because as far as I know, at least, there is no country zero. So that is why we have to adjust this. So there are various ways how we can deal with this. The best way, which I would highly recommend, is that you go to the department or the people who actually prefer actually give you the data, and then you ask them and ask for some kind of cleaning here. So what is the zero country? Because maybe this belongs to a specific customer and there's simply data missing. Then you would go to the department and ask for it. If you can't do it, or they tell you what the missing data is, then you remember you could go to the transform data editor. You can click it, you open the Power Query editor, and then you have the option, if you go to, let me actually refresh this, if you go to your, in this case, orders table, and then take a look at the customer. There's a customer country. If I scroll on here, there's a customer company, and there should be a customer country as well. So if I scroll on here, I can see my customer country, and then I could select this column, and we already know that there is a replace values function. So either you click it up there, or you right click on the column and say you'd like to replace values, and then of course you can replace the zeros with the specific, well, country which they belong to. That would be an option, right? So for now, I simply close this because there's nothing we want to do. The last option, of course, is to simply filter the data. Now you can also filter the data in the query editor, or you can simply select the visual itself, and you see that there's a filter pane on the right side. So you could then drag the customer country in the filter pane. By now it's already inside because it's in our visual. And then you simply click on here and say you, for instance, like to not select all, but you select all first, and then you untick the zero. And if you do it this way, now you can see that the zero entry is gone here. So now it starts with Austria here, right? So it's totally up to you. If you want to filter the data, you can do that. Also, you know that you can decide whether you want to show the audience actually the filter pane or not. So if you tick this I here, then this filter will not be available in the report, and the consumer of the report will not know that you filtered this data out because he has no option to see this specific interface. So for now, I just untick this one more time and just leave it for now like that. Just make it a little bit smaller. But that would be a way how we can get rid of the data. And the visual itself, you know that you have all the formatting options which Power BI provides. You simply need to select the visual, and then you go under the formatting pane, and then you simply take a look what's available here. For instance, there are data labels which are currently off, so you can tick them so you would see the numbers. They're currently formatted in millions. Maybe that's the way you want it. Maybe that's not the way you want it, depending on the amount of sales, of course, you have. You can always go on here and then take a look at, let's say, color. I'd like to have a darker color here, so black. And then for display units, I'd say maybe not auto. Let's actually try out thousands. Let's see. And there's, oh, at least for this data set, looks like a lot better for me. You can also specify the number of decimal places. So let's actually maybe set it to 1, if that's enough. And still, if you do not like it the way it's currently displayed, you could always go to the orientation. Also say you would like to see it vertically. That's also possible, right? If that's a better way to, or better approach to see it, depending how you want to visualize that. It's totally up to you. Beside this, you can adjust, of course, the text size, make this bigger or smaller if you want, and also, of course, the font family. And a background, if you turn this on, then you have a little background icon, this color, which might be helpful, especially if you have a white background. Could be helpful. of course, you can also change the background color and also transparency if you want to do that. Also interesting could be that the sentiment colors, because by default they are, for this visual at least, green, red, and blue. Maybe you want to adjust this. For instance, for the totals, you could say, actually I like to have it maybe darker, so use it black here, or maybe that's too strong, you go with a gray here. So this is up to you how you want to format this. The same is true, of course, for the increase and the decrease colors. So these are the default ones here, but of course you also find different kinds of colors, and they are based on the theme as well. But if you do not like them, you always have the option to go to custom color and choose here a custom, well, a hex code for a specific color, which you can also always look up on the internet. Or of course you can simply ask the department, because each bigger company has their own corporate identity, and then you can also ask for that as well. So that would be options to format this, to get some additional insights into that, right? So that's already helpful. So filtering this data. What could also be helpful, of course, is that what if I like to see a change, for instance, the profit number? So currently we have the total sales on total profit here. So total profit is simply the division or the subtraction from total sales to total cost. Okay, so it's the difference. So what if we'd like to see the total profit last year from the prior year? We can actually do exactly the same as we have done for the total sales last year. So it's also something I like to mention here that, of course, you do not have to reinvent the wheel, right? So if you have a measure already prepared, you can always copy it. Or you can also dive into calculation groups, but this is a part for another session. So here, the easiest way I can think of now is simply using this. I can actually use everything, Control-C to copy it, and then we simply go to the measures table one more time, we click on a new measure, and then we simply paste it inside. Of course, as always, if you want to practice, you can also write it yourself one more time, but it's actually exactly the same code. So we want to modify a context, a filter context, so that's why we use calculate function. Then we need to, of course, adjust the measure, because now it's not total sales, it's total profit. So total profit. And then with this total profit, we would like to actually shift it back 1 year. So the second part, so this new table, which we use in order to evaluate the measure, so this dates table, 1 year shifted, this is exactly the same as for the total sales. So the only thing we need to change is actually this measure here. So then finally, of course, we want to rename it as, let's say, total profit last year, profit last year, and then we can press enter. And here we go. Now we have calculated the total profit last year. Now, of course, you also can go in here and say you want to make this a dollar symbol and also switch it to 2. You press enter, and then we can see we got the total profit last year also calculated. And finally, of course, what could be interesting is now what's the difference actually between the current profit and the profit from the prior year. So there, what we could do is simply calculate the difference. So if I right click on the measures table, click on new measure here, and say now I'd like to see my difference. So let's say profit change, and of course you can calculate this either as a percentage number or absolute number. In my case, I simply say the profit change is the total profit, and I simply subtract the total profit from the prior year, right? Like that. And I'm done. I press enter, and I have the measure created here. And finally, of course, I also like to format this correctly, so I select it and also switch this to a dollar symbol here, and also go set this to 2. Now, of course, if you don't want to do this every time, you already know that you can create all the measures and then do a bulk formatting in the model view, right? It's possible as well. For now, that's fine, and we have our total, the profit change actually. So total profit last year, and the profit change, which is here, this measure. Okay, and now of course we can visualize that as well. So in order to do this, I would first actually go with a slicer here. So select my slicer, because remember that the total profit, of course, even the total profit last year, the modified one, needs some kind of context. So for instance, if we gave it the year 2019, then the last year function would know, okay, I need to evaluate the total profit for the prior year, so 2018. That is why I'd like to use a filter here, or in this case a slicer, and go first to my dates table here and simply select my years. So I can go with the fiscal years, for instance, can select this one, and then I would get here fiscal year 2019, 20, and 21 in our data set. And if you're like me, then you maybe prefer if you go on the general settings for this filter and switch it to horizontally. That's not required, but I personally prefer it this way, and then I make this a bit smaller here, and of course you can place it anywhere on the screen, wherever you want to place it, that's fine. And then of course, maybe for now here, and of course you can adjust it whether you want to display the header, the title here, and what exactly you want to display, also what kind of colors you want to use here. All this is possible here under the item sections and so on. So the font color here currently, for instance, is, let's make this maybe white. So I'll take this white, and then for the background here, let's say we would like to have this blue background, then we hold it like that, right? Of course, you can use any other kind of color you want, also depending again on the current thing you're going to use. So if I'm using this one here, now I have the option to simply choose a specific year, and then the difference, the profit difference, is much more interesting to us. So for instance, if we do it kind of similar as we had before, so I go with my, let's say, my countries again. So let me actually shrink this a little bit. So on the orders table, we have the customer country, and let's actually first create the visual itself. So let's say we'd like to see this as a, let's say, a bar chart, right? I use here a bar chart, and then I say I'd like to see my customer countries. So I'll select those in the axis, and then of course I also need some kind of measure, numerical value, and this time I'm using simply the difference of the profit, so the profit change here. So I can select this, and now I can see here my profit changes. But currently, of course, there is no really year selected. This is why that's not what I want. I want to select it. I want to see it for a specific year. For instance, if I tick on 2020, then I would see, let me actually, because everything gets filtered, we already know that, but let me actually also maybe add some kind of numerical fields here. So the data labels on, so we can see those as well. And if I would select 2021, then I would see a lot of differences considering the negative aspect, right? The reason simply is, remember that our dataset currently contains the complete year 2020, but only the first 5 months of 2021. This is why, of course, then the difference between those two is largely negative for a lot of countries in here. That is the reason for that. The same is true for the financial year 2020 concerning 2019. There's a huge difference, for instance, United States, simply because 2019 is not complete in our dataset. I just wanted to mention that here, just in case you're wondering. But on your own projects later on, then of course you would have probably several years and also complete years of data. And then you could easily simply take a look at the profit change, visualize that, even a bar chart, for instance, could also be any other kind of visualization, but really get some quick insights based on some basic measures we have created. Remember, we created total cost, total profit, total sales, but then with these basic measures, then on top of those, you can build several insights, several measures, and then use them to have some more insights and show them to your audience. Okay, so that's it actually for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you were able to follow along. And as always, I encourage you to try it out yourself. If you get stuck, take a look at the resource section. There is the complete file. You can take a look at it. You can play around with it. And otherwise, see you in the next video.